They can find us at Facebook. We are Facebook. Facebook.
Yeah, just go to facebook.com. You'll find us.
On Facebook.
You are Facebook, the whole thing.
That's right. I am Facebook.
Oh, really? Well, then we have some talking to do, buddy.
This is the AT Banter Podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
My name is Rob Minot, and joining me today, Mr. Ryan Fleury.
Good morning.
Yeah, I don't even know why I bother introducing you every time, because really we're at your place. So it really, if you're not here,
something's going on.
We're not.
I don't
there's
know
no
about.
show, so everything is yours. So no Steve Barclay today. He's out, but we do have a special guest. Ryan, will you do the honors?
Joining us from the Blind Inspiration Cast, the one, the only, Colleen Connor.
Hello.
So glad you could join us again on such short notice.
Drop everything for AT Banter.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And now,
Well, you did say
It's
you
going to
had...
be a really important and significant topic, you guys.
I know, it's going to be crazy.
This is going to change the world.
We hope so. Changing the world.
Okay,
One
now the pressure's on.
day at yeah, really. Yeah, you put way too much pressure. Now we're just
One weird
fold,
group of blind people at a time.
That's right.
No, listen. Yeah, thanks for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on. What's going on with you? What's new? What's been happening?
Well, for me, recently, I've been still working with my audio description business,
Yep.
audio description training retreats. And I'm also recently got elected to the subject matter expert committee in the U.S. for establishing a certification for audio description. So I'm working with a group of individuals and kind of representing the blind community as far as, creating a standard of a test, basically a certification that people can get in order to be professional audio describers, so that we can begin to have some sort of quality control along with that certification. After the describer certification, I'm also passionate about creating a consultant certification as well, so that there's a certification that users of audio description can take and kind of be editing and quality control for audio description. So it's going to be a long process. We started a couple months ago, and basically we have a call every week, and we're creating from the bottom up a certification that's going to cover the aspects of audio description. So it's a lot of work. Of course, you don't get paid for things like that because, life. But I think it's historically significant and, just significant world around. We have people from all different countries who are interested in what we're doing. So, so that's kind of been taking up a lot of my time.
Well, I think that
and then I'm also still working on my web accessibility certification. So I'm trying to get more tech savvy.
It's interesting. Audio description, and I'd love to get your perspective, being down in the States. We're going through an interesting time right now. And I don't know what it's like down there. But do you find audio description is really starting to get some traction? Are more and more networks and stuff really jumping on board? Are you seeing a lot of activity there?
We are. I would say there's a big uptick in audio description, simply based on the fact that there's been some more press about it.
Right.
Also, a few people, at least I know in the States, have won lawsuits. Netflix is, committed to having 100% of their content that they produce have description.
Good.
And recently, Amazon Prime has put forth that some of their stuff is going to have audio description. Hulu
Right.
is jumping on board. So I think some of the streaming services and just some of the press there has gotten people interested in it. But also the FCC, which is in this country, the Federal Communications Commission, they've recently gotten the law is kind of kicked in for them to have the ability to reinforce
Yep.
Networks and the top, I think it's like the top 5 most popular channels or whatever, saying, no, you have to have description.
Right.
And with the government, it's the same thing, websites, things like that. Like if you're producing content, you have to have description, you have to have captions. And so I think it's starting to, pick up and go somewhere. People are starting to hear about it. And so it's definitely, there are still people that I meet, every day who have no clue what I'm talking about. But there are a lot of people who will say, oh, that was a setting I saw. Or like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, I've heard something once that had a bunch of weird description in it.
Well, and it's such an important thing to get moving on, because you think about closed captioning and the difference that makes, and that's ubiquitous now. I mean, that's everywhere. And I think that's the goal. I mean, we need to get audio description to that point too, because just like closed captioning, I mean, it has mainstream potential. It's going to benefit everybody.
Mm-hmm. Somebody who's totally blind, like myself, can't enjoy the same programs as my sighted wife unless there's audio description, right? So
yeah, exactly. It makes a huge difference when it comes to consuming media.
Yeah.
Not to mention, there's all this potential for a whole other entertainment industry in terms of voiceover work, and there's jobs that can be created there. So I think that it is a really important aspect. So I think you guys are doing really, really important work. And I think that it's going to benefit you guys in the long run, because once it does gain a lot of traction, the demand for organizations like your training courses are going to be really in high demand. We just have to get to that point. But, and it's interesting.
We're already seeing like an uptick in our, people are very interested in coming to, we're actually having to put people on wait lists at this point for our classes.
Yeah. And it's,
so yeah.
Well, and I think that what happens down there is really going to influence us here in Canada as well.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting too is that you have, for about 10 years here, there were 3 different times a bill was put forward to give the FCC the authority to be able to request audio description, and it was shot down. And then again, someone was like, I know that the networks in Hollywood appealed this, but you really should be providing audio description, and it was shot down. And then finally, in 2010, when Obama signed the 21st Century Communications Act, that was like, no, the FCC has the authority to say that, I think it's something like 4% of the top agencies have to audio describe 5 hours a quarter of the most watched shows. And when you think of something like that, you're talking like 5 hours per quarter.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a week.
Mm-hmm.
That's not and they, they say over the next 10 years it can increase over time, and you're like, really? Like, that's not even that much, and people are still fighting about it. Like, it's it's post-production, it's too fast, we can't do audio description, blind people don't watch TV. Like, it's a whole thing.
And I think
also, I've discovered recently something very strange that I did not know is, for instance, the show Game of Thrones is audio described in England.
Really?
So the show has audio description. And I was like, oh, how do I get Game of Thrones audio described?
Well,
but the problem is Britain has their track, and they're not sharing the track.
Yeah, it all comes down to licensing and what you're buying. Like, Amazon Prime in the US, Prime Video, some programs, a lot of programs have audio description. Amazon Prime Video here in Canada, the same program, I don't have audio description. So is it what Amazon is distributing region specific that is going to, determine the license and what you get with that license, right? Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Huh.
Which I think is silly because it's English. It's the English language. Like, between Canada, the UK, and the States, it like, if it's been done, why do we need a Canadian track, an American track, and a British track?
Yeah, it should
like,
be...
I can understand if the terms were so wildly different that somebody wouldn't understand the context of it, but it's we hear British describers all the time. Like, it's not, so the streaming content stuff is starting to be very strange because it's like, who owns what? And no, you can't use my track. And it's like, really?
They need to follow what the Marrakesh Treaty has done and open the borders up. If a book's been audio described in Brazil, that book is now part of, Bookshare. They've joined the Marrakesh Treaty. That book's now available to anybody around the world. Same with media consumption. It shouldn't be any different.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the audio description is much more involved and expensive to produce than, say, closed captioning. I think that's why content creators, why there's this pushback.
But why is it region specific?
But but that's but exactly. I mean, so that's why it's important to open it up, to share the tracks, because we're already seeing them bulk at the cost of producing this stuff. Share it. For God's sake. It's really ridiculous to get caught up in licensing battles over that, if that is indeed what's happening.
Well, and I actually wonder if it's going to take, persons with disabilities forming a class action lawsuit against the media companies. We're consumers. We're paying the same bills as everybody else is to watch this media that's not accessible.
Yeah.
What's it going to take?
And I mean, I was speaking to somebody recently where I just said that as someone who's blind, it's exhausting to wear my advocacy hat 24/7.
Sure.
Like, sometimes you just don't want to have to carry a picket sign around.
Yeah.
You're like, can I just live my life?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm tired of trying to constantly educate people, or, I just wanted to go see a movie with my friends. I didn't want to have to educate this whole movie theater and not get to see the movie because the equipment doesn't work, or whatever else.
They don't even know they have the equipment.
Yeah. And I think that's a challenge for all of us. Any kind of disability is you do have to self-advocate, and you do have to learn how to talk to, various types of organizations and jobs and everything else. And sometimes it's just exhausting. It's like, I don't want to have this fight today. Like, I'm not, everything's a lawsuit. And sometimes you just don't have the money and time to deal with it. But I think that ultimately anything that's gotten done over time in disability rights is because somebody sued.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, that's how anything has gotten done significantly, and that sucks, but it's true.
Yeah, it is.
You know.
But I'm glad. Well, I'm glad I'm glad that it sounds like it's a growing field, and it's becoming a little bit more
Talked about anyway.
Yeah, I mean, because that's always the first step.
Yeah.
So, and
Yep.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, I think, where, you don't really think about audio description or whatever until you're faced with it yourself, until there's a personal relationship to that. Whether it's you have a child with a disability, you meet somebody, you have a friend with a disability, and you think about, what about audio description? What about closed captioning? What about transcriptions? Some people just don't even think about alternative access.
And I think, too, that unfortunately, the way that audio description started, at least in the United States, was as a volunteer service. Some of the describers started, out of the reading radio service people.
Yeah.
And so it was this volunteer situation, whereas you have interpreters and captioners get paid because they have a certification, they have classes, that's, you have to have a standard. And so we're establishing that now. It just so happens that we are the beginning of the change in history.
Right.
We're actually doing that. But I think that, it comes from a point of like, oh, well, if you're going to audio describe, is it cheap or like, is it free? Don't people just do that? And it's like, no, you need to pay somebody. It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. See, and I'm just wondering, like, so for, audio description, you think, will we get to the point where, I don't know, somebody good enough? I mean, and we already see this. There is such a thing as, live audio description.
Mm-hmm.
We have an organization here called Vocali that describes things like live theater and like parades. Different. They do the Pride Parade every year here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And so there's a real, and they have a whole training program as well on what it takes to sort of do this live audio description for live events. And so there's a real skill to it, but it's possible. And I would think that the same thing could be said for doing live description for different programming.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful, though, because typically if you're watching a show that has an excellent audio description track, it's not jarring and it doesn't take you out of the show that you're watching, right? If you've got a show and the audio description is pretty bad, maybe it's too loud, maybe the accent of the person doesn't match the dialogue of the show, it can kind of remove you from that, right? So there's an art to it for sure.
Well, and
yeah, it's an art and a science at the same time, which is why it's very challenging. There's a lot of aspects to both live and pre-recorded description. Like, for instance, the Olympics were described, and that's live description.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Right. Here in Canada, we've got an organization,
there's a couple different organizations.
Yeah, there's a company called
Descriptive Video Works.
That's right, and we've talked to we talked to the head of that, and years back. It's interesting to hear sort of how an audio descriptive track is produced and the work that goes into it. Like, somebody has to sit down and you have to write a script. You have to do a sort of a run through. There's all these different aspects to it, and there's differing qualities, obviously. And I'm sure that's something that you know all too well, Colleen. But let me ask you this though: like, is it realistic for, say, a network to be like, okay, we need to produce an audio descriptive track in 24 hours? Is that doable?
It's doable. It's done. It sucks.
Okay.
It's very difficult. And in that type of circumstance, you would want to contact somebody who has their own studio and maybe does all the aspects of description. One of my friends who lives in Vancouver, Cameron, runs Serafina Sound Studios, and he actually will watch something, write the script as he's watching it, then record it, edit it in, and send it. out of his home studio. And so, you get somebody like that. I know with the movie Arrival that came out a couple of years ago,
Right.
The writers, so the people who wrote the film, were also the people who wrote the audio description script. So they were really familiar with the writing and this, the screen directions, the stage directions, and all that already. So, the description and stuff for them ended up being quicker. And then they spent, a day in the studio with a voice artist recording, who didn't even know what she was recording for. She didn't understand what audio description. She didn't even know what it was. She was just sat there in the studio and read lines. And the script is fairly good. And now I have trained that voice artist now at this point, but she got introduced to audio description because they asked her to come in and record for this feature film this weird script that described everything.
Wow.
It's like, okay. So a lot of stuff is done very quickly with audio description, but, they're hard pressed to find people because, again, no one's certified. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, you got to try and find somebody who's basically like, okay, this person seems to have done some good ones, so let's have them do it. And who's the first bidder who can give us this in 24 hours? Like, it's,
Yeah.
So it depends. And with technology now, there's so many opportunities where some people have home studios, some people work for, a company like, Deluxe, or, a company where they're actually going into a studio to record. So it just depends. But I know that description is always done post-production. And it makes it challenging because you got to do stuff quick.
It's interesting. So the question becomes, if audio description becomes a thing, say the thing that's mandated. Let's just say let's live in a perfect world for a moment and just pretend that audio description is just a thing that every piece of content needs to have, and that's a mandated thing. So who's responsible for that track? Is it, say, the producers of, say, a show like, I keep going back to The Bachelor. Let's just continue with that. So is it the producers of The Bachelor that's responsible for the track, or is it Fox who airs the content?
It's Fox.
So
it would be the
the
production companies or the network's job to get that done.
So,
if it's a serial type show.
Because it seems to me that, and I have no idea how this all works. I don't know how if the networks receive each episode, a certain time before they air it, or if they get, like, do they just get the whole season and then they just distribute it weekly? But however that is, it seems to me that it's totally realistic to expect that they can produce these tracks, in a given time. I mean, it's something that they say only get like hours before air. I mean, that I can understand. Okay, that's going to be difficult to produce, a track for. But certainly something like a weekly TV show, that should be no problem for them.
Well, and who better than the writers of that show to possibly write the audio description script and then hand that to the voiceover artist? If the writers of the program are writing the program, they know where the gaps in the dialogue are going to be. They know where the audio description will fit in.
Well,
right.
Well, again, I mean, that's definitely living in a perfect world. I mean, that would be awesome if they took that into account when they were actually producing the show. But I mean, I think that's
Netflix is doing it,
going a little bit too far. Well, no, I don't. I mean, Netflix is doing it, but they're doing a post, right? It's not, the writers of the movie they're not thinking about how this is going to play, when we produce the audio descriptive track.
Well, let's get them on the show. Let's find out.
Hey, Steve, why don't you tell the fine folks about Canadian Assistive Technology?
Well, Canadian Assistive Technology is a Canadian-based distributor of, guess what? Assistive technology.
I would not have guessed that.
Really? Oh, I got to work something better into the name then. And we do all kinds of low vision and blindness aids, as well as all kinds of physical access aids and accessible furniture. You name it. Visit our website at www.canastech.com.
Rick, let me ask you about this. Chaos Technical Services.
Chaos Technical Services.
Don't sound so excited about it. Woo! Speaking of repairs.
We are the sister company to Canastech. We do the repairs on low vision devices, reading machines, for libraries, braille printers, and pretty well anything in between. We can be found at www.chaostechnicalservices.com.
This is something that we've been talking about a long time on the show, and it is a passion for us. I know it's a passion for Ryan because Ryan is this consumer that is starved for audio descriptive content, and I think it's a really important thing because it's so, when we don't have this content that is audio described, it's very exclusive, and especially given we live in this culture that if you're not, you miss out on so much if you're not able to consume entertainment. It drives so much of our cultural conversations these days. So I think that's even more important to have audio descriptive tracks. If you have somebody who can't actually talk about Game of Thrones because they don't have any way to really participate with it, that's important. It's an important thing to talk about.
Yeah. The biggest example that I tend to give people when they first talk to me about audio description is, there's kind of two things that I say is that audio description, it's not just this thing for people with disabilities. Audio description could be, as you mentioned before, for somebody who's taking a road trip, or somebody who's cooking dinner and not able to watch TV the whole time, or, it's good for students in the classroom. It teaches them different observation skills, vocabulary, how to describe things. Right. But it's people who look at a menu, let's say, and they see, gyro wrap with lamb, and they see a beef wrap and a turkey wrap and a vegetarian wrap, and they go, well, I'm not a vegetarian, I guess I'll get the turkey one. And it's like, you don't have to be a vegetarian to get the wrap that has vegetables in it.
Right.
It's just a wrap that happens to not have meat. So again, it's audio description. It's not just something for people with disabilities. You don't have to think about it as this, oh, well, that's for disabled people. You're not going to do that.
That's right.
And the other is that, something that's extremely frustrating for those of us who can't see is, how do you feel when you're on the outside of a joke? It's the worst.
Right.
Everybody around you is laughing, and you have to turn to someone and say, what happened? What happened? Because you are on the outside of the joke. A lot of comedy is physical. And this is coming from someone who's a comedian. It's, a lot of comedy is physical, and it is, if you don't catch a joke, it's like the worst, you know, or, something that pops out and scares everyone in the audience, and you turn and you go, what happened? I mean, the whole thing is just, you're completely on the outside of a cultural experience that it ends up being a vicious circle because, producers and Hollywood people are going, well, blind people don't watch TV. They don't watch movies. Why would we do this?
I know.
And it's like, we don't watch it because it's not accessible to us. If you made it accessible, then we would watch more of it, and you would have a broader audience. But because it's not there, we don't have it, we don't go. Like, it's just a vicious cycle. It's,
Yep.
you know,
And I think
something that we have to change.
And I think that is changing. You know, all these companies are starting to realize that, you know, they're missing this whole consumer group, right, that has money to spend as well. And unless they start addressing those groups, they're not going to get that money.
That's the thing that I think really needs to change, is that this idea that, you know, people who are visually impaired can't participate in something because of accessibility. It's not that they don't want to consume it, it's that they can't, and you've built it in a way that they can't access it. And that's what needs to change. All the big movie companies, they do produce audio descriptive tracks. Am I right about that?
Almost everything is described now. A lot of times, Marvel actually specifically contracts I think it's the Deluxe company in England,
right,
to do all of their stuff. That's why almost all the Marvel movies are audio described by British talent.
Right.
Right.
But there are companies that, you know, sometimes at the end of the credits, it'll list the, you know, who described it, like the voice artist and the studio that they're from. But that still means that, you know, the film itself contacted an outside source, Deluxe or Caption Media or, you know, WGBH, or they're contacting somebody and saying, we need our film described, do the audio description.
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, and so there's all these pieces in place. TV is really where the pain point is right now.
I'm actually wondering if turnaround time is actually a real sticking point, because, like, I don't know how many places there are in the U.S., like you say, Colleen, WGBH and so on. You know, here in Canada, we've got Descriptive Video Works. I think there's Audio Eyes. There's a couple different companies that do the audio description for TV and movies. Are they so busy that they can't do a 24-hour, 72-hour turnaround time? Is there that much content that they're being thrown at that they have to describe, that there's just not enough of them to go around?
Yeah, we hear for audio description training retreats, Jan and I will get emails from producers or from companies saying, we hear that you train describers. Do you have we need describers. We need writers. And what they need the most of is writers. They're constantly looking for writers. So we're often at this point training our students and then getting them jobs, because we're like, this studio wants writers, go, you know. And it's, you know, because the studios are starting to go, they're handing us all this content. We only have a week. And so we need somebody to write. It might not take the voice artist super long to record everything for this, you know, one TV episode, but we need a writer. We need to fit the timing in. It takes time, you know? So, and what sucks is it's not just translating. We're not just interpreting. We're not just writing down what is being said. You actually have to create the script, make sure it fits. What words are vivid and succinct? How do you be pithy in between a gunshot sound effect and introducing three people who come into the room? Like, what do you know, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And it's something that they're looking for. And I think part of it is probably just that, is the volume to time ratio is just almost impossible.
Let's hope.
Where is the real problem? What's the holdup? Why don't we see audio description just being a thing, cross-platform, cross-medium, like TV, movies, cable?
I think there's several factors that make it like several setbacks. Just as you say, the government. I think that, you know, the first person to come up with the idea of audio description was Chet Avery, and it was in the 60s, and he was blind and he worked in the Department of Education. And he was like, hey, I'm blind. And, TVs are starting to get into people's houses and stuff. And why don't we get describes what's going on for blind people? And everyone was like, you're so funny. And that was how that went. And then, it wasn't until the 70s when Gregory Fraser started, really wrote a thesis of the first concept of TV for the blind, because one of his friends was blind. And he sat there and described every TV show to him growing up and was like, well, this is dumb. This should be done for everybody. So, that started in San Francisco at the same time that in Washington, D.C., Margaret and Cody Fansteel started doing it for live theater. And so I think part of it is it got started all over the place. So you had, in the 80s, really, you had San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Boston, and then it kind of went to North Carolina. And then it kind of spread around, but nobody was talking to each other. There was no standards or regulations, or it was just, I learned this skill one time and yeah, you can learn from me and then we can do this. And you start to have these little organizations who, as part of their services, also provide audio description. So like you were talking about with, I think you said Audio Eyes. It's like if you want a production to have, I'm going to see this play in 2 weeks, can it be audio described, please? And they'll help you get it described or provide describers for that particular show.
Right.
So I think part of it is that it's so far spread around that there was no unifying big bill law thing that was like on its own, audio description, bam. It was just one of these things in the ADA, one of these things thrown in the 21st Century Communications Act. It was one of these things just thrown in that was like, you have to have captions and no flash videos, and you have to have transcripts of stuff, and you have to audio describe your video content. So it was like all of these things regulated for the internet and the television. And then it was like, well, nobody knows what this is. I think visibility is the other. I was a musical theater major who was going blind by the time I got to college and, finished my degree and everything. I was a cane user. I was doing Braille. I was, significantly visually impaired. And I never heard of it, ever. I didn't hear about audio description until I was working in a museum. So you have just the fact that the visibility is so low. I remember telling my counselor when I first heard about it, I was like, hey, because I was getting vocational rehab help to get a job. And I said, do you know about audio description? And the counselors at the Department for the Blind and Vision Impaired, like the blindness welcome wagon, they'll tell you about talking books and the reading radio service and all this stuff. They don't know what audio description is.
Yeah.
They didn't even know what it was to tell me that it was something I could enjoy as someone who's losing their vision. That was not something that was ever told to me. And so I think the visibility is low. I think it's really far spread out. The government regulations, and frankly, the final thing I would say is it's called like 15 different things.
Yeah.
Legally, the term we're going with is audio description, right, because it's just what got handed down, and it's the most popular. But if you think about it, it sucks as a term because the first word is audio. So people immediately go, oh, ears.
Yeah.
So when you say I do audio description, they're like, oh, here's the stuff for the deaf people. And you're like, nope.
Yeah, and we've got descriptive audio, we've got descriptive video service. Like you say, there's so many different terminologies to describe, the second audio channel, the second audio programming channel. What was I going to say? I think the other big issue when it comes to audio description is that nobody who needs it knows what actually has been audio described. I can go to the APH website, American Printing House, And they actually have a listing of, I think, some of the shows that have descriptive audio tracks on Amazon Prime Video. And that, goes back to my, when I looked it up on Prime Video Canada, this didn't have it, this didn't have it, this didn't have it. None of us know what programs actually have been audio described and what service they're on. So even though the content is coming with audio description, we don't know where to find it.
Exactly. The other thing is, even if we know where to find it, how the F are we going to turn it on?
Well, that's the other thing, right?
Yeah. You also have the fact that they're just now starting to come out with stuff like a talking cable box,
right?
Or like that you can control your TV with Alexa or something like that. Mm-hmm. But really, when I put in a DVD, you're telling me I have to click the right button for the menu. I have to somehow get to the languages menu. And then I have to somehow know in my brain that English video translation means audio description.
4 clicks to the right, 5 clicks down, hit enter, 3 clicks down, hit enter. It's ridiculous.
And then you don't even know if you're right.
Exactly.
It's like it's always in a different location on the website. If you look on a physical DVD box, if people do that anymore when they go to the store, sometimes it's listed on the box in the teeny tiny print on the back. Sometimes it's not.
When it comes down to
sometimes you can buy a version of a DVD that has it, and the version and the DVD next to it won't have it.
Yeah.
Like it's
even the streaming boxes, like the whole streaming service, I think is still a Wild West. I've got a couple Apple TVs in my house, because they're accessible and I can turn VoiceOver on and have full access. But a couple years ago, I bought a Roku streaming stick that everything I read says it has, I think, voice viewer, voice access, whatever it's called, so it'll read the menus to me. That's not available in Canada. And I bought a Roku stick that works. It said, Canada or whatever it said on Amazon, and there is no voice access. And when I asked Roku, they said, it's not available in Canada. So not all streaming sticks or boxes are even accessible. It's ridiculous.
Right. And so I think that a lot of that is, it goes so far up the ladder and so far down the ladder. It's like users don't know about it.
Yeah.
Or they have so much trouble accessing it. The people who produce the content just are trying to check off a box. So it might not be good quality, or it might not be available, in Canada or in the UK, or it's only available in one area. For as far as lucrative, people they don't get paid extra for doing this. And then, all the way up to the top is the government, the laws regulating it is sure the FCC can shake their fist at a television network or a film and say, you have to do this. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's still classified as an art. Yeah. So we can't tell Hollywood how to make the art. But we can say, you have to make this accessible. But the only way that gets done is the consumers throwing a fit.
Yep.
Suing or something like that. That's the only way in the past 10 years audio description has moved forward, is that people just have to sue.
Well, and I used to give the Americans a hard time for, suing, everybody. But, the more we're talking about this, go for it. Sue everybody and anybody. Let's make it change.
But using just the example. And Ryan, my heart's warm when you say that. I love that you say that because I love it. I'm the same way, man. Sue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's true. That's the only way that companies really wake up and pay attention when they're getting sued or when they're getting publicly shamed about something.
Yep.
But although I will say the other big thing that they respond to is demand. Mm-hmm. Look at movie theaters. To go into a specific example, movie theaters have been struggling for a while now. And you would think if they had any brains in their head, they would jump on this idea of making accessibility a priority because that's a whole demographic that they could get into. There's money on the table for them if they actually made their accessibility experience a pleasant thing to go through, because we hear a lot of stories here about people who go in to, and these are established services that they advertise. Somebody who's blind or visually impaired goes in to use this equipment, this special equipment, to go to listen to the audio a descriptive track along with the movie in the theater. And from what I understand, all it is, it's like a pair of headphones that plugs into
a box.
Yep. But so often they'll go in to use this, and it'll be broken, or the theater staff don't know what they're talking about, or don't know how to use it, and so they just go, and it's a complete train wreck. And they go, well, I'm never doing that again. I'm not paying like $18 to go to a movie that it doesn't even turn out to be accessible when it was advertised to be accessible. We hear so many of those stories. If they went the other direction, it was just like they made sure that there was plenty of seating that had access to these boxes, and they advertised that, and they made it a real pleasant experience, and they marketed that. That's a whole demographic that would flock to theaters, I'm sure, and pay the $18 to go see a first run movie with an audio descriptive track and have a real good time with that. That's money on the table for them at a time when they're struggling to get people in the theater in the first place.
Well, we've spoken to somebody, and I forget who it was now. We'll have it for the show notes. But he's developed an app, and he's working with some movie studios. So this app, they get the audio described track from the movie, whoever produced the movie, or the network, or whatever it is. So you can actually go to the theater. Your phone, your smartphone, this app runs on your smartphone, syncs up with the time coding in the movie, and now you're using your own device, your own headset. You don't actually have to use the theater equipment. And, the downside of that is, it costs money to get the licensing for the audio descriptive track, I guess. But, it's a step in the right direction. We don't have to rely on the movie theaters and their equipment. We have our own devices. The other thing the movie theaters could do, instead of a box, just have the movie play with the audio descriptive track playing, and anybody who needs it, just plug into a headphone jack on the armrest or something, and you automatically have access to that track.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also one thing that I had to explain to several local movie theaters is that if the movie theater doesn't download the correct version of the film that has all of the accessibilities settings,
mm-hmm.
they won't have the audio description track to play for you.
Right.
So, the file, they have to also download and purchase the right file.
Right.
Nobody's up there rolling reel to reel anymore.
Yeah.
There's not, it's digital. And so if they have downloaded the wrong digital copy, it won't have the audio description. Also, it would be nice to know which seats the audio description works well in, because a lot of the headphones are infrared operated. And so sometimes I'll be sitting listening to the audio description in the theater, and in order for me to actually hear the audio description, I have to hold the receiver box slightly above my left shoulder.
Wow. Just
because it's infrared and there's something in the way.
Oh,
wow. So I'm glad we're not using that technology here. There's a lot of just very bizarre factors. And I think that, again, I understand the staff at a movie theater might rotate quite frequently. They should, they should really, if they offer something, if there's a sign and you offer it, you need to know what I'm talking about. So then just let us bring our own devices, let it time code sync up with the movie on the screen, and everybody will be happy. You got it if you need it.
Mm-hmm.
No more proprietary boxes. This movie theater uses this type of box. Yours uses a different type of box.
Well, and and the big fallout of all of this is that when a visually impaired consumer has a bad experience, they just never go back. They're like, I'm not going back to this particular theater, or I'm not going to bother going to first run movies because, really it's a train wreck. So they don't go. And then as a result, the theaters go, well, look, no one's using this stuff. So there's really no demand. So it's clearly the blind and visually impaired people don't actually want to go to the movies. So why are we going to spend any money developing it? So, I mean, there has to be this call for, accessibility. So there has to be this demand, and the only way to do that is just to make your voice heard and say, look, this is something that we want as a community. We demand this.
Well, and I wonder, are there actually agencies like here in Canada? Is the CNAB actually going to, the famous players of the Silver Cities and saying, look, you guys, if you want to be accessible, well, you think about it, they are offering many, many autism-friendly screenings of movies now. Autism is like the disability to have right now if you want to go see a movie. Malls are having autism-friendly events going on. So obviously the Autism Society or somebody is reaching out and communicating to these other groups. That needs to happen in the other disability arenas.
It kind of comes back to our idea of audio description does not have to just be for someone who's blind. It can be very good for people who are autistic, who have ADHD. Like, it helps you focus on the film or what's going on in the show. And, I've tried to explain to a movie theater before, like, this is a wheelchair ramp so that people who are using mobility devices that have wheels can get into your theater. You are not giving me a wheelchair ramp.
Yeah.
In order to access this movie. You're not letting me in because this equipment doesn't work. And I've come to this theater 8 times and all I have to show for it is 8 free passes from the time that the equipment did not work. I'm not going to come back here with my free pass to continually have my free experience of not experiencing anything.
Exactly.
So
when it works great. But, I think if we can take the next step forward and our theater using a different technology than your theater, Colleen, and having to rely on the theater's equipment to be working, let us just bring our own devices, have it time code sync up with the movie theater, and away you go. It makes more sense to leverage mainstream technology than proprietary devices.
Yep.
And maybe that's what
I agree.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a gentleman on the committee with me who is developing an app not only for film but also for live audio description as well. Like if you realize that a play or a musical or something has an audio describer that evening, you can log into the app on your phone and you can pick up different radio frequencies until you hear the describer for the show.
Wow.
So there's a few different things going on and technology moves so quickly. But the problem is that's all over the place too.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have people who are still trying to do the old school stuff. And then you have people creating apps, so.
Well, here we are at the end of the conversation. We haven't solved a damn thing, you guys.
We just need more audio description.
That's it. That's the solution. More.
We
Give
need
me
more. Somebody figure it out. It's above my pay grade.
And also,
it's above all our pay grades. None of us are getting paid for this.
I love how I love, obviously I edit audio description and I help train audio describers. So people ask me all the time, Colleen, will you describe this? Like, we need describers. Like, why won't you just describe this? And I'm like, I'm blind. Like, yes, I understand I am in the field. I cannot describe. And you're like, why? And I'm like, because I can't see it.
Because I think that balloon's yellow, blue, red, green, white, orange, purple, black. I have no idea.
It's funny.
Well, but the good news guys, is that,
We're getting there.
more and more, these are conversations that are happening.
Yep.
And the technology is there. I think the content producers need to just be aware that there's a demand for this, and it's in their best interest to produce it, because the more people that have, access to their content, that's gonna benefit them. So we got a ways to go before we live in utopia, unfortunately, and it didn't happen in this 45 minutes.
Well, at least, in the last year, maybe 2 years, if you're still watching physical media like Blu-ray, at least we have services like Ira or Be My Eyes, right? That we could actually put the disc in, dial up an agent, and they might be able to tell you what's on your TV screen and help you navigate the menus of your Blu-ray player and actually get to where you need to go. Right.
But isn't that stupid too? Like,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Honestly, like none of the menus on this physical media are accessible.
Absolutely.
Like, why the technology is there to make a accessible Blu-ray player or to make these menus accessible, but just there's nobody's holding their feet to the fire.
I hear you. Yep.
So let's bury an accessibility feature in an inaccessible menu. Like, makes no sense.
I know. No, we are getting there. Like you mentioned earlier, we have some hardware cable boxes that will actually have text-to-speech, so you can navigate your menus. Sony has a line of TVs that actually have text-to-speech. You can go ahead and turn it on. It'll read your menus out. Some people are doing it, and the problem is that we don't know who's doing what. And if we as consumers aren't gravitating and purchasing those products and letting the manufacturers know how much we appreciate that, we're back to the argument, well, blind people don't watch TV, and they stop producing it, right? So, it's a small market, but again, it's a market that has dollars to spend, and I think that that mentality of the manufacturers is slowly changing, but we need to make our voices heard.
I mean, honestly, like, it is not outside the realm of our technological capabilities to make a completely accessible smart TV.
No.
Right? Like, that has, heck, could they not have a screen reader built in to write into the TV?
Some computers,
they're smart TVs, right?
Some computers are running Android. So they can do whatever they want now.
Right. So you could, because a lot of those smart TVs, that's probably what they're running, right?
Yep.
They're running like a Android or some sort of operating system.
Yep.
You could build a screen reader into it so that all the menus are accessible. You could build right into it. On the remote, you could have audio description track, audio track, right? Like, you could just press that button and it automatically goes to...
It would turn it on? Yep. Absolutely.
That's possible. You could build that TV. Problem is, you built that TV, then you'd have to market it as, it's an accessible TV. And
you
then,
would, because nobody would know.
And then it would be a niche market, though. Then it'd be like, only blind or visually impaired people are going to buy this TV. We're cut out of the mainstream. What you need is a mainstream manufacturer like Sony to just be like, hey, here's our newest 4K TV. Oh, incidentally,
it includes these features.
It's also completely accessible. So it's good for anybody you want.
Right.
That's what you need to happen. Like, we need to piggyback. Unfortunately, we need to piggyback off mainstream technology.
Yep.
The frustrating part of it, now I'm getting angry. Now, because the frustrating part of it, all the accessibility aspects and everything that's gained traction has gained traction because it's built in as a mainstream device. That's just the nature of things. That's how you get some traction, is that, it's an awesome mainstream device, but it's also, a really powerful piece of AT as well. That's why digital assistants, that's a perfect example of, it's a fantastic piece of AT, but it's also, people can use it in everyday situation as well.
Yep.
So that's kind of what we need to have happen, I think.
Preach it.
Yeah. And it's, again, that's why I always try and introduce it as audio description is a great option. Basically, it explains kind of visual poetry for something that you're looking at, whether it's art or live theater, live performance. You can basically audio describe anything. And it is a voice artist or a script that is describing visually what's going on during key sound effects and dialogue. So it can allow people who have, if you're sitting in your car and you want to catch up on the show and binge the rest of your show, it'll visually, you won't miss anything. It'll be describing it to you. Which also means that, blind people can enjoy all of culture. Have you ever been on a audio tour of a museum? It's like that, and you have to present it to these able-bodied people so they don't get scared. Because they're afraid. We don't want to use a disabled thing. Yeah. I don't want the vegetarian wrap. I'm not a vegetarian. I can't use that wheelchair ramp. I'm not in a wheelchair. Yeah, what if you're a mom with a stroller? What if you're someone who has a rolling suitcase? Yeah, what if you're someone who's carrying a large cart?
How many times?
What if you don't feel like doing the stairs?
How many times a day do you use the curb cut in the sidewalk as you're crossing the street and don't even think about it?
Yep. Yeah. I use wheelchair ramps all the time because I'm just effing lazy. It's just like I don't want to.
That's what they're there for. I don't want to do stairs.
Yeah, exactly. Oh boy. Okay. Well, listen, Colleen. I see by the clock on the wall we need to let you go soon. So thanks for
bailing us out.
Yeah. Thanks for exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can people find you on the old internet?
Yes, ye old internet. I can be found at blindinspirationcast.com, which is all one word, Blind Inspiration, CAST, like podcast. And also, if you are interested in learning more about audio description or about what I do, you can also go to adtrainingretreats.com. And that AD stands for audio description. So adtrainingretreats.com. I'm on Twitters. I'm on the Facebooks. I'm on the interwebs. And I'm also on YouTube, where I'm still working on my series about myself and my guide dog, Joplin.
Oh, are you really? Oh, you haven't seen those. I will have to check those out.
There's some fun Blind Inspiration Cast YouTube channel things as well. So if you're on YouTube and you search Blind Inspiration Cast, you can find all my YouTube content also.
Well, there you go.
I've not been able to post in a while. Life, for some reason, keeps happening. So hopefully more content soon.
Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
They can find us online at atbanter.com.
They can also drop us an email if they so desire. Cowbell.
Bing, bing.
At atbanter.com.
Where's the cowbell? Oh, it's on the other side of the room.
On the other side of the room.
That's
I couldn't get to it. I wasn't going to dive for it.
I know. That's a workout.
They can also... Oh, wait. Where else can they find us, Ryan?
AT Banter on Facebook. Twitter, we are AT_Banter.
Very good. You're knocking it out of the park. And Instagram as well. We're at AT Banter. No, wait. No, we're not at Instagram. What are you talking about?
Yeah, we are. You put us on Instagram.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing on Instagram.
Oh, I'm also on Instagram as well.
Are you?
Blind Inspiration Cast.
How's that working for you?
It's a challenge, and I'm still working on it.
I know.
But they did recently come out with an article on how to add alt tags to your pictures and videos on Instagram and Twitter. So do it.
Get on it, Rob.
Yeah. Oh, don't even get me started on that. Yeah, Twitter has that capability, but it's not on by default. It's insane.
Yeah, way to go, Twitter.
Yeah. Like, great. Build in some accessibility features that nobody knows how to turn on, you idiots. Okay, anyway. See, now I'm mad again. You guys keep making me mad. Where are we?
We're in the guitar dungeon.
That's it. That's where people can find all of us. Colleen, absolute delight talking to you again. Let's do this again that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks everybody for listening in, and we'll see everybody next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com, or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840, or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.